So I'm going to finish my check on the motor today. We're going to flip it over. We're going to check all the bearings. I got the information I needed to take them apart and put them back together. So let's take a look at that thing. Here's a little more in-depth look at the engine. Like I said earlier, it is a stock Chevette 1.6 liter. A few of the things that you might notice right off the bat, we've got the adjustable cam pulley. It does have a bullet camshaft in it. These for this engine are extremely hard to find. This one was made by, I believe, a fellow in the early 2000s out of Ohio. Used to make these things out of his machine shop. He raced Chevettes at the time. Now you're lucky if you can find them used. But there seems to be a guy that has been reproducing performance parts for these cars recently, which is an added bonus. They look like really nice units as well. So the intake manifold, it is a stock Chevette intake manifold, but it has been reworked. I've removed the water jackets all the way along the bottom and the back side, and we have also ported all the runners. The runners have all been ported from the inside out. Inside, I've got an epoxy that's shaped the inside, kind of smoothed out some of the edges where I made the new intake or the new carburetor plenum. The carburetor from the factory actually sits 90 degrees. So I've rotated the carburetor 90 degrees and made the plenum to adapt to it. Otherwise, it's got a stock water pump, stock distributor, stock ignition system other than the MSD box. You'll notice there is a factory fuel pump in there, a stock mechanical fuel pump. I don't use that. I normally run the electric fuel pump, but instead of plugging that with a plate, I've kept that fuel pump in there, and there's been twice now where the mechanical fuel pump has failed at the track, and I've been able to replumb it and use the mechanical pump. I've got the old reliable Weber 3838 two-barrel downdraft carburetor. I know the vast majority of the guys are using the Holley 500s. I tried that route, and for the longest time had nothing but problems with it. They just don't seem to take the vibration of a four-cylinder engine very well, and just cause so many tuning issues that I got really frustrated and ended up going back to the Weber. It took a little bit longer to learn. There's quite a bit more tuning you can do to them, but for this engine it's performed extremely well. So here's a look inside the cylinder head at the camshaft. The Chevette setup is a little different than your conventional overhead cams. It's actually a two-piece unit, so the cam carrier actually sits on top of the cylinder head, and then they're both bolted down by the head studs. For what reason, I'm not entirely sure. But it does seem to make it a little bit more cumbersome to work on than, say, the Mustang 2300s. You can just pull the valve cover off and you got pretty easy access to everything. Inside here I've got upgraded valve springs from Bullet, and then I'm running homemade solid lifters, as they don't make solid lifters for a Chevette, if you can imagine. So I've gone ahead and made my own. There was a fella, the same fella that made the cam gear, was also making solid lifters way back in the day, but 90% of those have probably broken since then. Or you pay a mint for them because the former racers that don't need them anymore know what they're worth. So here's a closer look at the lifters I've made. It's simply just a jam nut and a dome head bolt, and it happens that the dome head fits nicely inside the rocker arm. Works really well. Inside the rocker arm, I've drilled a hole right through the center. I don't know if you can see how close it is to center. Anyways, I had to get a special real carbide drill bit in order to drill through that. That's extremely hardened steel, but it worked pretty well. And then these are the only two tools that you need to adjust the lifters. I got a custom made nail, and the nail goes inside the oil, the old oil hole where it would fill the hydraulic lifter. There's a little hole in there. and I drop my nail in there. I got a long Allen head bit for my socket, and I just drop it in there. I don't know if I can do this with one hand. Until that nail, it sinks into the groove that I've cut into the lifter body, and then from then I can tighten and loosen and check for my clearance as needed. It makes it really easy. You don't need to try and get 2 hands or 2 wrenches in there. It's pretty handy. I didn't come up with the design myself. A fellow Chevette racer, somebody who's helped me out an extremely large amount over the years, working on these cars and working on these engines. That was actually his idea he came up with, and never actually got to put it into test. It works really well for me. They don't back off very easy, and as long as you weld the nuts in there fairly square, they work really well. So this is the alternator I run, or that I'm going to be running. I just tried it this year for the first time. This is a stock Chevette alternator. It's kind of your standard GM alternator for the most part. This is out of early 90s Suzuki Swift or Chevy Sprint, Pontiac Firefly, I think, with the 1.3 liter 4-cylinder in it. It's about half the size, half the weight, the same output, and believe it or not, it bolts in to the factory Chevette alternator mount with 0 modifications. The only thing you need is a longer bolt to get it through, and it bolts up with 0 modifications. Has a nicer wiring harness. Otherwise, it's a nice easy swap, even for some of you guys still running the Chevettes on the street. So an exhaust header is something that isn't readily available for a Chevette as well, believe it or not. There was, up until just a couple of years ago. Custom Craft had made a header. They were a pretty nice unit, but they've since seemed to have stopped producing them. So this one I made myself using just a bunch of old headers that we had lying around, and then did my best basically using a piece of string and the longest runner to make an equal length header. Again, I don't know the science behind exhaust for the most part, so I just tried to keep the lengths as close as possible, and they're all within a 1/4 inch. Whether that makes a difference or not, I don't know, to be honest, but it seems to work pretty well. The merge collector is a Shumfield off a sprint car, believe it or not. It was just an extra one my old man had lying around, and I've been able to use it. Upon further inspection, I noticed there's a nice big crack in it that we'll have to address before we put it back in. But either way, other than the paint jobs that you always hope work and they never do on these things, it's a decent unit. It's not something you can use on the street because it does go through the firewall. However, there's a company out there that makes these flanges, and if you wanted to build your own for the street, and you had the capabilities to, you could. Here's the oil pan. As you can imagine as well, there's no aftermarket oil pans for a Chevette at all. So I built this one using the stock pan, and this is just a claimer kit for a small block Chevy from Speedway Motors. It's a kit that you can use to modify a stock small block Chevy oil pan for the circle track. It comes with the little things. There's a couple swing gates here on either side. I made this piece with the holes to let the oil drain back in. There's a passageway here, so the oil drains back into here, comes through the swing gates, and it's in the pickup. Less oil sloshing around. The pickup sits nice and close to the bottom of the pan. Oiling is never really been an issue here, as long as the fuel pump doesn't crap out on us, or the oil pump doesn't crap out on us, sorry. In order to make this pan work, I've had to modify the oil pickup. It originally mounted on these holes here, moved it back about 2 inches, and welded a filler pipe in between from the oil pump to the pickup. It works really well. Before I used the steel pipe, I did have just a chunk of hose in there. I thought that was all I needed, and over time, as the oil and the heat soften it up, it would suck itself shut and I'd lose all oil pressure. So not an ideal situation, but now it's working flawlessly. So this is the crankshaft and the connecting rods, basically the guts of the motor. As you can see, it's pretty much a stock crankshaft. It's not knife edged or lightened in any way, strictly balanced with the rotating assembly. It's got Eagle H-beam connecting rods, actually for a Honda Civic 1.6 liter engine, that just happened to fit a little extra rod length. Just needs custom pistons in order to work. It's just got the flat top pistons, which are probably worth more than the entire rest of the engine combined. Well, that's a look inside the engine, the little tiny engine of this car. It's nothing crazy, it's nothing groundbreaking, it's 40-year-old technology and 20-year-old parts. Will it keep up with every mini stock class in North America? Probably not, but it does quite well up here when all conditions are right. The little motor makes the car move pretty good. Everything looks really good inside. The bearings all look really nice. The internals are clean. The oil came out clean. Oil pan was clean. Really happy with the way things look. Otherwise, I'd be looking at replacing it with this engine with parts from this box, and it's probably not going to work for me at all. So anyways, next time around, I'm really hoping I can get started on the front end, try to get it ripped apart, and maybe even start some fabrication, get into some of the fun stuff that I can do here. So far we haven't had to spend a whole lot of money this year. I am going to order an oil pan gasket. I need to order an exhaust gasket, and I might as well order a timing belt, and that's really all the engine should need other than a cleaning. So now the fun starts. We're going to build some stuff, we're going to try and revise some stuff, and get this thing back to looking like a respectable race car again. Thanks, guys.